When America went to war, the true cost of Vietnam. The Vietnam War is considered one of the most controversial, bloody, and far reaching conflicts of the 20th century. It was not limited to the battlefield alone, but shook the political, social, and moral fabric of the United States. In the 1960s, at the height of the Cold War, the world was caught in an ideological struggle between two superpowers, America and the Soviet Union. The fear of communism dominated America's mind to such an extent that it justified intervention in any country where even the slightest threat of communism appeared. Vietnam, which was fighting for independence after a long colonial slavery, became a victim of this policy. The United States described its military intervention in Vietnam as a holy mission against communism, but soon this war turned into a quagmire where thousands of American soldiers were killed and millions of Vietnamese civilians were devastated. This war was not just about guns and bombs. It was a struggle between a nation's sovereignty, a superpower's ego, and the conscience of the entire world. The roots of the Vietnam War go back to the late 19th century during French colonial rule. After World War II, the Vietnamese intensified their struggle for freedom, led by Ho Chi Minh. In 1954, during the Battle of Dien Bien Phu, Vietnamese forces defeated the French army, leading to the Geneva Agreement, which temporarily divided Vietnam into two parts, North Vietnam, South Vietnam, and South Vietnam U supported government. The United States feared that if North Vietnam succeeded, all of Southeast Asia would fall to communism. This belief was known as the domino theory. Initially, America provided only advisory and financial support. But after the Gulf of Tonkin incident in 1964, the US Congress authorized military action and millions of American troops were sent to Vietnam. The US saw this war as part of a global campaign against communism, while for the Vietnamese, it was a fight for freedom and sovereignty. This fundamental ideological conflict was the real driver of this brutal and prolonged war. The Vietnam War was one of the most brutal and complex conflicts in modern history. When American troops set foot on Vietnamese soil, they faced an unseen enemy rather than traditional frontline combat. Vietnamese guerrilla fighters, known as the Viet Cong, used jungle cover to launch attacks, laid landmines at night, and ambushed American soldiers unexpectedly. The war was fought not on open battlefields but in swampy areas, dense forests, and rural villages. To eliminate the enemy, America used highly lethal weapons, including napalm bombs and chemical agents like Agent Orange. These weapons destroyed land, crops, and human lives alike. Thousands of innocent Vietnamese civilians, including women and children, fell victim to these attacks. The infamous My Lai massacre was the worst example, where hundreds of unarmed villagers were brutally killed by American soldiers. This war was not only a test of military power, but also a trial of humanity's conscience. The battlefield of Vietnam became a horrifying image of bloodshed, fear, and destruction. As the war dragged on and the casualties mounted, voices opposing it grew louder within the United States. Initially, the public trusted the government's narrative, but as the media began showing real images of the war, dead bodies, destroyed villages, and bombings of civilians, people's attitudes changed. Newspapers, especially the New York Times and the Washington Post, questioned government policies and called the war pointless. The greatest anger was among American youth. They were being drafted forcibly into the army, while wealthier classes often avoided service. University campuses filled with protest demonstrations. In 1970, when the National Guard shot 4 students at Kent State University, it sparked nationwide outrage. Leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. openly opposed the war, calling it immoral and a genocide of black and poor youth. The Vietnam War deeply divided American society, divisions that persist to this day. The war left deeper psychological and emotional wounds on American soldiers than physical ones. Approximately 58,000 American troops died and millions were wounded, many permanently disabled. But the psychological trauma was even more severe. These soldiers faced constant guerrilla attacks, landmines, and an invisible enemy in dense jungles, with death looming every moment. Upon returning home, they were often met with coldness, neglect, or even hostility as the public had grown weary of the war. Many soldiers became victims of PTSD, post traumatic stress disorder, experiencing insomnia, severe depression, suicidal tendencies, and social isolation. Many turned to drugs or alcohol. The government largely ignored these wounds for a long time. This was the cost paid by individuals for a war they neither started nor understood, and which they could not win. By the early 1970s, America realized that the Vietnam War was not only unwinnable but also damaging its reputation and economy. Internal protests, international pressure, and ongoing casualties forced the government to seek withdrawal. In 1973, under the Paris Peace Agreement, the US began military withdrawal, but this was only a formal victory. In 1975, after all American troops had left, North Vietnamese forces captured the South Vietnamese capital, Saigon. The evacuation of the last American personnel and a few fortunate Southern allies by helicopter from the US Embassy rooftop became a historic and humiliating scene. Saigon was renamed Ho Chi Minh City, and Vietnam was unified as a communist state. This defeat was not only military but also psychological, political, and moral. A superpower was defeated by a poor but determined nation, forcing America to reconsider its foreign policy. The cost of the Vietnam War was not limited to bloodshed or billions of dollars. It wounded America's soul, shaking its political, social, and moral foundations. Though America spent about $168 billion, 0 cents on the war, and lost thousands of soldiers, the damage that cannot be seen is far deeper and more permanent. The war created a distrust in American society that persists today. Revelations like the Pentagon Papers showed the government lied to the nation for years, hiding the real truth and sacrificing millions for political gain. Psychologically, the nation was affected too. Returning soldiers were treated as criminals rather than heroes, leading to mental trauma, suicides, and loneliness. Racial divides, poverty, and class inequalities deepened further. This war teaches us that imposing one's will on another nation, regardless of intentions, ultimately leads to destruction. The true cost of Vietnam was not just blood or money, but a moral bankruptcy that tarnished a superpower's global reputation. Though the Vietnam War ended decades ago, its impact remains etched in American politics, military strategy, and international relations. It was not merely a regional conflict, but a manifestation of arrogance, misinformation, and flawed policies. The most important lesson is that ideas cannot be changed by force, nor can a nation's quest for freedom be crushed by calling it terrorism or rebellion? The mistakes America made in Vietnam have been repeated in Iraq, Afghanistan, and elsewhere. Policymakers fail to understand local people's desires, histories, cultures, and aspirations for sovereignty. Public awareness also changed after Vietnam. Media freedom, civil society's power, and questioning governmental narratives grew stronger. People learned that democracy is not just about voting, but also holding rulers accountable. Vietnam still reminds us that wars are not won by guns alone, nor is military might the solution to every problem. True victory is winning hearts and minds. If today's world takes this lesson seriously, future generations may be spared such bloody and futile wars. If you like this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you get timely updates on our latest content. Thank you.